This girl, oh my god, are you still doing work?
Yeah, I'm so
Academic work. Academic work.
No, girl, that's dedication.
I cannot relate.
The fact that she came from Newark
To get work
here
done.
to this meeting and then she's working. That's dedication.
I just emailed my professor. I'm like, I can't do it right now. I'll do it tomorrow. Like, okay. That's, is Newark okay? Like, what is wrong with this?
Maybe that's normal in Newark. That's what
It's so ghetto.
Assalamualaikum guys, welcome to tonight's event. Today we have some amazing speakers that will be giving us some insight on the topic of gender interactions, as you may know. But before that, we'll get on to recitation, Quranic recitation by Rafi. Yeah, go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الخبيثات للخبيثين والخبيثون للخبيثات والطيبات للطيبين والطيبون للطيبات أولئك مبرؤون مما يقولون لهم مغفرة ورزق كريم يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا تدخلوا بيوتا غير بيوتكم حتى تستأنسوا وتسلموا على أهلها ذلكم خير لكم لعلكم تذكرون فإن لم تجدوا فيها أحدا فلا تدخلوها حتى يؤذن لكم وإن قيل لكم ارجعوا فارجعوا هو أزكى لكم والله بما تعملون عليم ليس عليكم جناح أن تدخلوا بيوتا غير مسكونة فيها متاع لكم والله يعلم ما تبدون وما تكتمون قل للمؤمنين يغضوا من أبصارهم ويحفظوا فروجهم ذلك أزكى لهم إن الله خبير بما يصنعون صدق الله العظيم. I'll be reciting the translation now. This is Surah Nur, Ayah 26. Vile women are for vile men, and vile men are for vile women, and good women are for good men, and good men are for good women. Those are free from what they say, the accusers say. For them there is forgiveness and a graceful provision. O you who believe, do not enter any houses other than your own houses unless you seek permission and greet their inmates with salam. That is good for you so that you may be heedful. Even if you do not find anyone in them, do not enter therein until permission is given to you. And if it is said to you, go back, just go back. It is more decent for you. Allah is all aware of what you do. There is no sin on you if you enter houses in which you have rightful benefit. Allah knows what you reveal and what you conceal. Tell the believing men that they must lower their gazes and guard their private parts. It is more decent for them. Surely Allah is all aware of what they do. Assalamu alaikum.
Okay. Jazakallah khair to Rafi for that beautiful Quranic recitation. So as I said before, the topic tonight is gender interactions. So from the intent and the purpose to the adab and the dynamics in the workplace, in the school, our speakers are going to be teaching us how to just embody our Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba as role models in our daily interactions. So please give them a warm welcome. But before that, I'm going to give you guys the speaker bios. So Sister Sumaira Khan is the co-founder of the Quranic Literacy Institute and a teacher of Islamic Studies and Arabic based in New Jersey. She pursued formal Islamic studies in Syria, where she spent a number of years at the prestigious Abu Nur Institute in Damascus, Syria. She holds a master's degree in Usul al-Din from the American University for Islamic Sciences and has memorized the Quran and received coveted ijaza of memorization. In addition, she holds scholarly licenses in the Quranic readings of Hafs and Shu'ba, the books of Hadith, and various classical texts. Sister Sumaira Khan is the founder and mentor of Iman Roots, which is a monthly forum in Central Jersey for women to educate themselves in Islamic knowledge and to strengthen sisterhood. She's also the director of a popular Sisters Hifz program at the Quranic Literacy Institute. And then we also have here tonight Brother Muhammad Shalan, who is a Rutgers alumnus and an NJIT master's graduate. In addition to his degrees in marketing and accounting, Brother Muhammad is an avid student of the Al-Maghrib Institute and Mishka University, where he currently is pursuing a degree in Islamic Studies. He has studied under many notable scholars such as Dr. Salah Sawi, Dr. Hatem Al-Hajj, and Sheikh Walid Basuni. Muhammad has also led national YM travel teams and is very active with the Syrian Forum USA, which is a cause he will be speaking about shortly after the talk. And you can go visit them in the back right there. They have a table. So without further ado, please give them a warm welcome and your undivided attention, and jazakallah khair.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم أجمعين. Jazakallah khair for this wonderful forum. I'm always excited to come to Rutgers, which is down the block from where I live. And alhamdulillah, today's topic has attracted lots of you to come and listen, which is wonderful because we're going to learn about the Islamic, inshallah, perspective on gender interaction. And I found this to be a very practical topic. We're not always given very practical topics to speak on. So this is actually something you have to deal with every single day in the classroom, here at the MSA, at home with your cousins of the opposite gender. And tomorrow will be your boss, your colleagues, your coworkers, your in-laws, right? So as Muslims, we ground everything in what? What is everything grounded in for us as Muslims? You can say it out loud or raise your hand. The Sharia. Okay, yeah, the Sharia or our purpose, right? We ground everything we do in our purpose, which is to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So literally everything I do or I don't do, everything I say or I don't say, everything I look at and everything I choose to not look at, all of this falls under interaction. And today's topic is on gender interaction. So this can easily completely become an area through which I worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when I engage myself with the opposite gender in the way that is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because yes, there are very clear guidelines in our deen for this topic. So I'm going to use this interaction to become a form of worship for me. And I'm going to, in this introduction, outline two things. One, the underlying sentiment of gender interaction. What is the underlying feeling or sentiment that you should have when dealing with the opposite gender? And what is the operating principle? Okay, these are the two things I'm going to give you in this intro. The underlying sentiment, what should drive you, guide you in your interaction with the opposite gender is respect. And this is most beautifully expressed in the adab of the operating principle, which is haya. Okay, so what should drive me and guide me when I'm interacting with the opposite gender is respect for that person. And I'm going to, the operating principle that's going to be, showing me how to do that is haya. And I want to share a hadith on haya because I think it frames the intro very well, which is an authentic narration in both Bukhari and Muslim, where the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Al-haya'u la yati illa bi khair." And you know this narration, that haya brings nothing but khair, nothing but good. And another narration, al-haya'u khairun kulluh. Haya, which is inadequately translated as modesty because it's much more than modesty. It is khair, all of it is khair. Okay, so yani you can't engage in it and not expect to get khair. It's khair to engage in it, it leads to khair, it increases khair, it brings about khair. So this is one of the characteristics that distinguishes Islam from other religions, other creeds, other ways of belief, and that is the etiquette of haya. And this is actually universally shared with all the previous religions that Allah revealed, believe it or not. I know they're not acting like that anymore, but there is a narration in Bukhari where the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Inna mimma adraka an-nas min kalam an-nabuwwa al-ula, idha lam tastahi fasna ma shi'ta," which means that from the speech that has reached us that was related to the previous nations, right, or the previous religions had this revealed to them as well, that if you don't have haya, then do whatever you want. Because haya acts like a restraint. Does anybody know the word for what you tie your camel with in Arabic? Any students of Arabic here? Anybody know the word you use for the knot that you use to tie the feet of a camel? Okay, so it's called uqal, right? Now, what does that word remind you of? When I say the word uqal, even if you don't know Arabic, what does it sound like to you? Huh? Like aqal, right? Exactly. So, because they have the same root word. Because aqal is supposed to be a restraining force, but in a positive way. Something that tells you it's not a good idea to run this red light. Something that tells you it's not a good idea to go for that fourth piece of brownie. So that aqal, that intellect, is intelligence of the mind that regulates your actions. And we can make the argument here that haya is related to emotional intelligence of the heart, which regulates your interactions. I'm going to repeat that. Aqal is the intelligence of the mind, regulates your actions. Haya is the emotional intelligence of the heart, regulates your interactions. Okay? So, haya is that thing which is going to hold yourself back when you're interacting with others, especially with the opposite gender. And ultimately, you have to bring it back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You do what you do, and you don't do what you don't do because of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because you want reward from Him, you don't want to displease Him, because you have haya even from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I want to conclude this introductory point by saying haya is something we first must have from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if we are embarrassed, or not embarrassed, but like conscious of the gaze of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon us, then we will have haya in our interactions with other people, same gender, opposite gender, and so on. So part of haya is to look at what you are doing, look at what you are putting into your head, into your heart, look at what you are consuming before we are consumed by the earth. And that's a very sobering thought, but that's what's mentioned in the hadith that I wanted to conclude my point with. It's a Hasan hadith in the collection of Imam Tirmidhi, rahimahullah ta'ala, where the narration goes, "Istahyu min Allah haqq al-haya." So the Prophet ﷺ is saying to Sahaba, the companions, have haya from Allah the way it is His right that you have haya from Him. And the Sahaba generally, they think that they do have haya from Allah. So they were actually very frank, and they said, "Ya Rasulullah, O Messenger of Allah, inna nastahi walhamdulillah." We do have haya, yani from Allah, right? Walhamdulillah, and all praises to Allah that we have this. And the Prophet ﷺ said, "No, that's not what I mean." So now he's going to go to explain what he means by having proper haya before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he says, صلى الله عليه وسلم ولكن الاستحياء من الله حق الحياة أن تحفظ الرأس وما وعى. But real haya is to protect your mind and all that it contains, yani all that you allow to go into it. والبطن وما حوى, and the stomach and all that you allow to go into it. And to remember death and bala, the deterioration of the body, the flesh, and the bones, which happens to a person that has passed on to the next world. To remember that is ultimately our end. No matter how noble we were spiritually, physically, everyone's end is the same, right? No matter how evil you were, how good you were, you're physically going to decompose. So this is what I had said about being conscious of what you consume before we are consumed by the earth. وَمَنْ أَرَادَ الْآخِرَةَ تَرَكَ زِينَةَ الدُّنْيَا. And whoever desires the akhirah, they would leave zinat dunya. They would leave the ornamentation of this world. But aren't we told to seek رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً? Aren't we told to ask for the good of this life and the good of the next life? So how do you reconcile that with this part of the narration which says whoever desires the akhirah would leave the ornamentation of this world? So hasana of this world would be that which brings you closer to the hasanat of the next world. But zinat dunya is that ornamentation which distracts you from the next world. Okay? فَمَنْ فَعَلَ ذَلِكَ فَقَدْ اسْتَحْيَا مِنَ اللَّهِ حَقَّ الْحَيَاةِ. So whoever does these things, and if anyone is interested, I can give you the narration. Whoever does these things has actually had haya from Allah the way it is His haqq, His right upon us, that we have haya from Him. Wallahu alam.
بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. اللهم علمنا بما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. It's great to be here. Jazakumullah khair for having me. So what I'm going to talk about today, inshallah, or at least for this section, is intent and purpose. Let me ask you guys a question. I'll ask the brothers first and then the sisters. When you talk to a sister, give me a reason why do you need to talk to her. It doesn't have to be right or wrong. Right? You can tell me I'm trying to be friends with her. It's fine. No judgment here. This is a safe space. Or you can tell me I'm trying to cheat the homework from her. Right? Either way is fine. Sisters are not going to look at you, I promise. Who can tell me a reason of why you need to talk to sister?
Because they write a lot in lectures, I take all the notes from them.
Okay. Thank you so much for sharing. So he said because sisters are really good note takers and he's lazy, most likely. Okay, very good. Sisters, tell me a reason, legitimate or illegitimate, that will make you talk to our brother or even respond to our brother. Let's say he initiates it, for you to respond to him. Again, safe space, yes.
I would respond to a brother if he asks me a question. For example, if we're in the civil building, he'll ask, "Oh, is the bathroom available?" Then I'll respond yes. Unless it's like a question that I have to answer or I'm the only one who can answer, I'll answer it. But if someone else is available, like let's say it's more appropriate to ask a brother, I'll say that's not a question for me.
Very good. Back to our brothers. What are some reasons that will make you talk to a sister? Yes. Group project, right? You have some work you guys need to do together. Very good. Yes. You need help with an assignment. You guys, you need a lot of that?
I'm gonna break the ice.
All right.
I'm gonna break the ice if she's pretty.
If she's pretty, ooh. All right. Okay. Oh, sister, yes.
I would say like when you're at work.
Very good. You're at work, right? And you just have a meeting together, you do stuff together. Very good. Anybody else? Anybody else? What are reasons that will make you talk to the opposite gender? Huh? Saying salam. You're just going on with your day. Like it. All right? Beautiful. That's great. Sisters, anyone? Let me ask you guys a question. And I'll ask the sisters. How many seniors are here? Okay. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm asking this for a reason. Most people, not everybody, some people, maybe not most, some people, when they get to the senior year of college, what topic comes up to their mind other than finding a job? Marriage. It's okay, it's fine. Is it okay? And again, and we'll talk about this, we just started the event, we'll talk about this inshallah. But I like to get some things from you guys before we move into the next thing. Is it okay for sisters who are graduating and they see a brother that they may have interacted with MSA capacity outside of another capacity that they think he could be a potential hubby for me? And can I go and ask him, hey, I'm interested. Let's get to know each other. All right, how many of the sisters, brothers, look this way? Seriously, I want all the brothers to look that way. This way, guys. Right? After this question. Sisters, how many of you guys will be okay initiating something like this? How many of you guys are not okay initiating something like this? Okay, very good. Okay, brothers, look at me. How many of you guys are okay initiating? You initiating, obviously. Very good. All right. So I'll share a few things, inshallah, and then I'll turn it over to Sister Sumara because we have like few points that we're gonna go back and forth in between. When it comes to gender interactions, guys, one of the most crucial aspects of what makes it okay, not okay, halal or haram, or the gray area is our intentions. Right? Our intentions are extremely important when it comes to my interactions with the opposite gender. And guess what? Only you can truly know your own intention. Obviously after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? Even some of the scholars said that the angels or shaitan does not know your intention. Only you know what you're intending by a conversation, by a question. Like you mentioned, hey, where's the bathroom? Bro, the sign is right in front of you. You don't have to ask a sister. Right? Stop playing games. Now, you can be very genuine. At first, a freshman, you don't know much. You saw a sister and you were like, hey, do you know where the bathroom is? It could be very genuine. It could also be very sketchy. Because there are other, you're hoping that this conversation will go somewhere else. Intention is extremely important. And intention sits with you alone and no one else. One of the things that I want everybody to get out of today's talk, inshallah ta'ala, is before any interaction, pause and ask yourselves, what's my intention? And again, don't play games with yourself. We know. We know for the most part Now we'll talk about what's okay, some guidelines. We'll talk about that in a second. But intention is very important. I promise you guys, somebody who's went to college here, you know, and obviously I interact with the opposite gender at work on a daily basis. You will find yourself reducing, especially in college life, you will find yourself reducing close to 50 to 60% of interactions simply by asking yourself, what's my intention? And that goes to face-to-face interaction and virtual interactions. You can send an email, hey, what's the assignment? Here's the assignment. The next question of, hey, what are you doing this weekend? It's not related to the assignment, right? For the sisters, right, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Quran, He says, وَلَا تَخْضَعْنَ بِالْقَوْلِ. This idea of the respond, but the way you respond. The response and the way you respond. Same thing with the brothers, by the way, it works too. What's your tone like? It's very connected to your intention. You can ask with a straight face. You can ask with the biggest smile on your face. Again, interaction, your intention. Same thing with the sisters, right? You know, one of the sisters, inshallah, who mentioned this in the beginning, is like, listen, if there's not a question for me, I'll tell you, dude, ask someone else. Again, our hearts, my brothers and sisters, are so important. And in a college life, this is perhaps your biggest test, is interacting with the opposite gender. Now we are talking here and there are sisters hearing you, and then there might be certain things that they know, so you might be slightly protected when you're talking to a Muslim sister. But when you're talking to a non-Muslim man or a woman, then a lot of these guidelines are not even there. I'll share a story and then I'll turn it over to Sister Samara. My older sister in high school, we went to public school, and it was like second or third week of school, and one of her classmates approaches her, and this is like, literally it was just me and my sister, the only Muslims in that school. This was like many years ago. I don't want to age myself. But she was approached by this guy, not Muslim obviously, and he goes up to her and he's like, has his arms up to like hug her, you know? And my sister for a second, she was like, I don't know what to do. Does anybody want to guess what she did? Huh? What is it? That's exactly what she did. She slapped him in the face. Right? And this was, I'm like, I told her at that time, if this was the opposite, I don't know what I would have done. Right? I mean, I wouldn't do that, right? But, and again, I'm not advising anybody to do that, by the way. It's not why I'm bringing up this story. The reason I'm bringing up this story is because in a high school, obviously you guys in college, in a college environment, men and women interaction is perhaps one of the biggest tests that you will deal with, right? Among Muslims, but also among non-Muslims, right? So a lot of what we're going to be talking about will have to do with intention, right? And then when we talk about guidelines and we talk about certain restrictions, that this is okay, this is not okay, it's all to protect you. Not to restrict you, not to prevent you from finding your husband here or your wife. It's not the intent, it's to protect you. Because the Prophet ﷺ, he said to us that in our body, there's a piece of flesh, right? That when this piece of flesh is good and pure and protected, the rest of the body will be protected. That's why we're doing this. But it all starts with an intention. Jazakumullah khair.
Jazakallah khair. Okay, so the next point I wanted to address was adab in interactions. And I'm glad Brother Muhammad brought up some really real life scenarios where you would perhaps interact with the opposite gender. Although brothers getting notes from sisters, like none of the brothers take notes. like, I know, okay, there's a brother taking notes right there. Okay, so those two you can always go to take notes from. So I was very popular in college around exam time because everybody would want my notes, right? But it was sisters who would, sisters can approach sisters, and if there's a brother approaching you for notes, it's kind of like a little suspicious because, their brothers take notes too. Okay, so we've outlined respect and haya, and we have put forward some real life scenarios. And I wanted to highlight something really important in the adab aspect of the interaction, what the etiquette. Language is really, really important. The way you speak, the words you use, the vocabulary, the choice of words can make the interaction either respectful or it can turn it into something casual. Okay? So it's really the tone of voice and the type of words you are using. That is the difference between a respectful interaction that is necessary and a casual interaction where you're having a little bit more fun than you need to. So I want to take an example of a word which I do not use this word. It is not a bad word, but it's an inappropriate word. And it's short for brother. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? Bro, right? Okay. Although I see girls using this for each other as well. Although you are not brothers, you are sisters. But it's like, come on, man. Like, sisters also use the word man for each other, although obviously it's, you know what I mean. But is like bro okay for, let's move a little bit away from our peers. Let's go, because we're exploring respectful interaction. Would anybody here use bro for their father? Or their uncle or mom, if you use it across genders? Would you use that? I mean, it's not a bad word. It's not a curse word, right? But like, if you come home after a hard day, from at school and you're tired, and would you say to your mom, "Oh, girl, you don't know what I'm going through"? Would you say that? Right? Although girl or bro, they're not really bad words, and they're acceptable with your peers, but they're not acceptable with your parents or in those relationships where respect has to be prioritized. And this is what I mean about using these kinds of terms with the opposite gender. I mean, obviously no one here has ever done that, I'm sure, with the opposite gender. But like Brother Muhammad had mentioned, when we are dealing with non-Muslims of the opposite gender, where we know their rules are lax, and so it's easier for us to slip. But our rules stay the same. And also with cousins. How many of you have cousins of the opposite gender? Everybody, right? Because we're second, third generation here now. So we all have cousins of the opposite gender. And we're very comfortable with them sometimes. Again, more than we should be. And it's easy to use this type of casualized language. So we have to remember, it's the respect that has to govern the interaction and the language. So these types of words, although they're not bad words, they're not curse words, obviously, but they're too casual, they're too informal to the point of disrespect. And this is why I think Brother Muhammad's sister, punched that guy, and you were very encouraging of her response. It's because that type of an advance is seen as so disrespectful. It's seen as, you think you can do that to me and it's okay. So it is actually, the guidelines in Islam are there to command respect for the brothers and the sisters, right? So you want to convey the foundational sentiment of respect in every interaction. And this is why we have lowering the gaze, okay? Because lowering the gaze, isn't that part of restraint? It's part of restraining yourself, which is basically the core of respect is restraint. And what's more respectful in terms of your gaze? Staring at someone? Is that respectful? whether it's Muslim, non-Muslim, or if you get this treatment, you know, if certain countries in the world, if you travel to them, astaghfirullah, they have such a staring problem. Like, they don't know that it's not okay for you to just stare like you forgot to blink. But this is normal, and unfortunately, in some parts of the world. So, managing your gaze when speaking to the opposite gender allows for respectful communication. You still can get the purpose of that conversation across, and like Brother Muhammad said, the intention is critical. So remember, restraint is part of respect. So lowering the gaze is there to restrain and regulate our interaction, to convey respect. Not that you're, somehow shackled into this rigid Islamic, rule, but it's there to actually engender respect in the interaction. Now, respect will always require us to lower our gaze, to look away, to manage ourselves, our tone of voice, and to be a little reserved, okay? So some people ask, what's the proof in Islam that there's no free mixing? What's the proof? What's the proof that there's no free mixing across the genders? Well, think about it. If we have guidance on restraining even our glance with the opposite gender, doesn't that make it obvious that we also have guidance on restraining our interaction with them? If you can't even glance at them freely, can you interact with them freely? The guidelines of hijab, of controlling your tone of voice, of not looking and not staring, this is the reason why, this is the proof why males and females cannot be friends. Last time I checked, friends hang out and play around and can have long conversations and look at each other and enjoy each other's company, as much as they like. Am I right? Does anybody disagree with this is what you do with your friends? How is that in line with all the Islamic guidelines we mentioned if you do that with the opposite gender? Hanging out, playing around, having long conversations, and by the way, virtually as well, right? Just because someone is behind a screen doesn't mean that Allah has been removed from the picture, right? Allah is still there, and all of that is being recorded. So, also the concept of the non-mahram. Why do we have that? If you can be friends with the opposite gender, and you can hang out with them and be friends with them, then the meaning of the concept of non-mahram becomes meaningless, right? And the narration from the collection of Tirmidhi about a man and woman not being together, or the third of them is the shaitan, right? So, and hijab again is that barrier. So all of these things we're pointing out, things you already know, but we're putting it in the context of understanding these are the proofs, these are the reasons, these are the guidelines that tell us that there is no free mixing. And this is what we have to keep in mind in our interaction, in our adab and etiquette of interacting with the opposite gender. Wallahu alam.
This was good. Bismillah, Bismillah, Bismillah. Okay. Okay. Beautiful. Okay, cool. So we addressed intention, we addressed adab. The next piece, inshallah, that we wanted to talk about is some sort of a balance. Because, again, it will be very difficult for all of us, or just you guys, all of us, if I say you cannot interact with the opposite gender. I don't think that's possible, right? Not in a college environment, not in a work environment, right? It's just not possible. And then there's the other extreme, where like just everything is relaxed and we're high-fiving each other in the hallways and like a bunch of other stuff. There are 4 things, inshallah, that will help us create the balance, right? 4 things that will help us create the balance. And this goes across once we have the right intention. Okay? Number one is what Sister Sumara mentioned already, which is lowering our gaze. Lowering our gaze, brothers and sisters, is so essential. And I'll talk to the brothers for a second. Your eyes connect to the rest of your body. And we as men are very visual human beings, right? We see things, we understand things, we just visualize life, right? And our Prophet ﷺ tells us that of the biggest enjoyment of this world are women. That's why we're encouraged to get married. The Prophet ﷺ encouraged us to get married for a reason. And the companions will go to the Prophet ﷺ and tell him, I want to get married. The Prophet will say, did you see her? Did you see the girl that you're trying to get married to? There is a very famous story of a companion who went to the Prophet ﷺ. It says, Ya Rasul, I want to get married to so-and-so. The Prophet said, did you see her? And the man said, no. And the Prophet says, go see her. Even if you have to hide behind a tree. Does anyone know why the Prophet ﷺ tells him to do that? Like, why you just go and like stare her in the face and look at her?
He might change his mind.
He might change his mind? Okay. But why behind a tree? Yes, behind you.
I said, like, out of respect. I mean, out of respect to not stare them in the face. Like,
Out of respect for the girl. Very good. Anyone else? Sisters? Yes.
I would say to not make her uncomfortable.
To not make her uncomfortable, yeah. I mean, yeah, absolutely. Anyone else? Yes. Okay, very good. Anyone else? Why behind a tree? Hayat. Okay. Anyone else? Yes. Okay. Anyone else? You know, one of my teachers explained this hadith to me. If you want to marry somebody, the Sharia gives you a one time to basically stir her down from top to bottom. One time. Don't make it a habit, just one time. Why? Because we're visual. People make decisions, especially men, when it comes to marriage, like, she's pretty, man, I'm done. I don't care about anything else. The point, when the Prophet ﷺ tells you to do that to get married, and then the Sharia tells you to lower your gaze, is because if you don't, you're gonna get into a lot of trouble. Do you guys understand the connection? So the first guideline, and this obviously goes for the sisters too, but I'm focusing on the brothers for a reason, right? But nowadays, again, brothers are working out, they're looking really nice. So the same thing goes for the lower your gaze. So the first thing is the Prophet, the Sharia tells us, the first guideline is to lower your gaze. Number two is make sure that there is a purpose and keep it professional. Socializing is not an acceptable purpose in Islam. Sorry, guys. A lot of this hangout that happens in student centers, there is no purpose, right? You either have a professional purpose, like the notes, because apparently none of you guys take notes, right? Or a project, or it might be even, again, like, the brothers and sisters work on MSA projects together. Like, that's a purpose. You keep it professional, it's a purpose. Marriage is an acceptable purpose also, by the way, right? If you are serious about it. Now, if you're trying to be a surgeon and you're a freshman, I don't know if marriage sounds like a legitimate purpose at the moment. You still have years ahead of you. Good work for some people, but this is, again, we talked about the intention earlier. So lower your gaze, make sure you have a purpose, and keep it professional. Number three, no physical contact. There's no room in the Sharia for any sort of physical contact. And a high five is a physical contact. Now, I don't want to get technical here. It's like you're touching because of desires and not desires. Just don't touch each other. Just that's it, right? It's really not that hard, right? And again, just for for being kind of inclusive of things, right? There is some space when there is a need, right? So for some of the, I'll use a very, it seems like a long time ago now, but in some college campuses, where encampments became very violent, brothers, if you see a sister being physically hurt, you better go in there and prevent that from happening. Don't say, I can't touch you. I mean, there's a need. You're saving her life, right? Again, and I don't want to reiterate what I mentioned earlier about intention, because we already addressed that. But there is a need, if there is a need, and obviously saving somebody's life is a need, right? If I don't know, like somebody's about to head by a car or whatever, like there are certain circumstances that may happen, and it might be relevant. If there's a need, obviously, when there are doctors, and again, there are certain circumstances, even in a college life, that may require a person to touch the other person for a specific need or a necessity. Obviously, 99% of the time, there is no necessity, right? So avoid physical contact unless there is a need, and that need obviously is something that's very, very obvious. And then the last guideline is no private meetings, right? No private meetings. That also includes virtual meetings, right? Now, I'm gonna be careful with this one because sometimes, again, you're in a conference room and it just might be you and another girl. By the way, and this also works for like Muslims and non-Muslims interactions, right? Hopefully that's understood from what we mentioned earlier. There might be some circumstances where you're like inside like a conference room or like a study room or whatever, and it's just you and another girl, you and another boy, okay? If you can go to a public place to work on the project or whatever you guys are working on, that's better. If somehow you can't, open the door, find a room that has a window so people can see you. There's a lot of these like practical things that you can do so you don't become excluded, like just you and her, you and him in one room for a long period of time. And Sister Sumara mentioned the hadith, right? And again, a lot of these measures, guys, is to create the balance. So you don't become too relaxed, and then you don't become too stringent, like there's no interactions. Because I cannot prevent. You cannot go to your professor and say, hey, put me in a group with only girls. Or put me in a group with only guys. It's just not gonna fly. Right? So these are the 4 things. I'll repeat them real quickly. Lower your gaze. Making sure it's purposeful and professional. Avoid physical contacts unless there's a need, a clear need, and then no private meetings, right? Because Shaitan is going to be hanging out with you guys, so make sure no private meetings. Allah Ta'ala.
Jazakallah khair. The last point the brother mentioned about no private meetings, everybody here knows about the Me Too movement, right? Everybody's familiar with that? So actually, after that happened, and there were so many lawsuits coming out against men for harassment, when some guidelines were actually instituted by large corporations to protect the men in their companies, in their corporations, from getting sued and winding up in court. And one of the guidelines was that no man can be alone with a woman. This was actually a professional corporate guideline that came out, and this was actually for the protection of the men, right, in this particular case. So it's actually for the protection of both. We already had this, alhamdulillah, in our Sharia. So something to be grateful for. Okay, the last point I'll be addressing today is to speak about some examples from the Sahaba and from the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam regarding how they dealt with the opposite gender. So I want to actually mention the interaction of the 2 girls with Musa alayhi salam first, right? Everybody knows about Musa alayhi salam and the way he interacted with the 2 girls at the time. This is in Surah Al-Qasas. If you look at the Arabic of the verse, which captures the conversation or the interaction after Musa alayhi salam had helped them, and she was sent by her father. فَجَاءَتْهُ إِحْدَاهُمَا تَمْشِي عَلَى اسْتِحْيَاءٍ. It's really beautiful in the Arabic. So one of them came to him, and to Musa alayhi salam. It doesn't mention that, but we know that's what happened. تَمْشِي عَلَى اسْتِحْيَاءٍ. Walking upon haya, like literally, that's how you would translate it. So she was engulfed by this adab, this etiquette of haya. And look at exactly what she says. قالت, she said, Inna, indeed, Abi, my father, يدعوك, calls you, ليجزيك, in order to reward you, أجرا, reward, ma, for what? سقيت, you gave water to our sheep, our flock, lana, for us. I want you to tell me, is there any word in these 7 words that you can take out? Inna abi yad'uka liyajziyaka ajra ma saqayta lana. These 8 words. Is there a single word you could take out? It is so to the point, right? Yes, brother?
You can take out in that.
Okay, jazakallah khair. So inna just means like indeed, like surely, like definitely, like this is the reason. Actually it was a rhetorical question, but I'm sorry about that. But thank you for your effort. You're technically right in the sense that, it would still convey the same meaning, but inna is used for emphasis, right? The point is that she got straight to the point. That's actually the point, right? There's no, hey, how you doing? How are you? It's really hot. You don't have shoes. You walked all the way from Egypt. Like none of that, right? It's just exactly what her dad told her to do is what she did, right? And haya has its rewards. Obviously, the barakah that comes from it, you will never get from sin. She winds up marrying Musa alayhi salam, right? So whenever you do something for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, including lowering your gaze and trusting that haya is better for you, because sometimes we think if we let go of haya, we'll be able to get the guy or the girl, right? Actually, it's the opposite. Because you want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to get them for you, or الطيبون للطيبات. The good men are for the good women, and so on and so forth. You have to enter into the guidelines established by Allah, trust them, and know that He will take care of the rest. They're not there to limit your chances for success or happiness or love. That's not the point, right? It's really to ensure that you achieve all of that and more in the most honorable way. So we've already mentioned about lowering the gaze. So alhamdulillah, everyone knows that. And that was something that the Sahaba also used to engage in, right? So the fact that the Rasul told the man who wanted to get married to look at her means the norm was they weren't looking, right? And it was only in the exceptional case of marriage is that you should look, right? So lowering the gaze is something that the Sahaba used to obviously practice. Obviously the women used to wear hijab, right? And the wives of the Prophet ﷺ, they wore niqab. They had extra guidelines for them. But again, it's not a piece of cloth that you wear on your head. And now some people will even say, Allah doesn't even mention hijab in the Quran. Allah just mentions to cover your chest, but it doesn't mention to cover your hair. So actually there was one individual that someone told me about. She had read the translation of the Quran, not knowing the Arabic, and she used to wear jilbab, but she wouldn't wear hijab. Because she's like, Allah doesn't say cover your hair, right? So what is something necessary for us to have to understand the Quran? What is one thing you must have in order to understand the Quran properly? Who could tell me? Yes.
Context.
Yeah, context, and what's the first vehicle of communication? The Arabic language, right? The Arabic language. If you don't know the original Arabic, how can you understand the intent of the Creator? You can't. So if you look at the word that is used in the Quran, which is the plural of khimar, khimar was specifically meant in the Arabic language to refer to a head covering, not a body covering, not gloves, not socks. It was specifically meant for head covering. And even the men used to wear that because it was so, dusty and hot They used to wear protective headgear. So khimar is actually used to cover the head for men and women. And this was something even the Jahili women used to do. They used to cover their head. That was not a new thing Islam brought. The hijab is not something new, but it was the way that you're supposed to cover properly, so that the neck is covered, the chest area is covered. That was actually the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Islamicized the khimar, the head cover that was being worn immodestly. So this was the second example or style of interaction between the Sahaba and the Sahabiyat. And I want to say one thing about the hijab. Shaykh ibn Adwi, one of our great teachers and scholars, he's a great scholar of hadith, hafidhahullah ta'ala, he makes a really important point. He says that you can interact with the opposite gender, you can talk to them as and when required, when is necessary, but there is something that qualifies you to interact in public space, and that qualifier is the hijab. So again, not just the physical cloth, but the entire appearance of physical modesty, of course, along with the right intentions for which it is worn. What does that imply? If you're not meeting those guidelines, then how are you going to interact with the opposite gender? Because at home you don't have to wear hijab, right? Obviously, right? The hijab is an etiquette, it's an Islamic requirement that qualifies women to interact in public space. Okay, so this is something we need to keep in mind. And the tone of voice we already mentioned. So Sahaba, you can imagine there was interaction, but there was no free mingling. Okay, yes, the women were in the masajid, but they would leave before the men did. Aisha radiallahu anha, to give a specific example, she used to teach men, right? You know this? She had male students. She's the number 2 narrator of hadith of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? She becomes widowed at 18. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam dies, and she lives on for about 5 more decades. So she was a teacher in Medina, right? So how was she teaching her students, including male students? Anybody know? Yes.
Behind the curtain.
Yes, very good. Behind a curtain, right? Yani, even though they are the most purest of hearts, they are the best generation. This is the wife of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who you can't even marry, right? And she has no prospect of marriage. Yani, all the possible dangers that could be available in the case of interaction with other women are not even applicable to her, because she's Ummahat al-Mu'mineen, she's the mother of the believers. You can't even marry her. She's the wife of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? But still she would have the protective barrier behind a curtain. And this is أَزْكَى لِقُلُوبِكُمْ وَقُلُوبِهِمْ, right? When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about when you ask the wives, ask from behind a curtain, He says what it means. This is pure for your hearts and their hearts. And think these are the purest of hearts. So don't trust yourself. Okay? Don't trust yourself. Because the Sahaba took these precautions, the greatest of them took these precautions. Anybody know the Sahabi Safwan bin Mu'attal? So this is the Sahabi who actually found Aisha radiallahu anha in the camp by herself after the rest of them had moved on because she had fallen asleep. And everybody know the story, right? So Prophet ﷺ would bring one of his wives with him to his battles, and they used to be carried in a hawda, which is like this little compartment on top of the camel. And Aisha was young, she was very light. So when the men picked up her camel, they didn't realize she wasn't in it because she was so light. And so they just picked up her empty hawda, empty, camel's compartment, and they thought she was in it sleeping. And later on, they didn't realize until later that she was never in it. So she had actually gone off somewhere and had fallen asleep when she came back to the camp and found no one was there. So they would have one person to check the camp at the end to make sure nothing left behind, no one left behind. And so she had been sleeping, and Safwan radiallahu anhu is the one who actually found her. And and her face was not covered at the time because she was sleeping, she thought there was nobody there. And then when he saw her, he recognized her because he had seen her before the niqab had become fard. So he recognized that this is Aisha radiallahu anha. You know what he said? He said, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Because he realized that, oh my God, out of all the people left behind, this is the wife of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and she's all alone. There's no one here, and only I'm the one who's here. And so he gave her his camel and held the rein of the camel and walked back to the camp without saying another single word to her. So this was the interaction of the Sahaba. They would even save your life. They would do whatever you needed them to do for you. But there was that adab and that respect. So if we fulfill these requirements, then the interaction is becomes permissible, right? Now, I want to say one thing before I conclude. In your MSA, or if your siblings are in other colleges and other MSAs, alhamdulillah, not everybody has the maturity that I feel you guys do have in this MSA, alhamdulillah. I feel that, mashallah, lots of different speakers come to you and you're quite knowledgeable about the adab and the interaction. Other MSAs are not in your situation, and I've heard quite, bothersome reports what goes on in other MSAs. If you see something inappropriate, say something. Address it, don't ignore it. You create your environment. You are here to benefit. Everyone here is trying to work for the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Inshallah, everyone has good intentions. You don't want to ruin your reward by doing it the wrong way. Because along with having the correct intention, what is the other condition for the acceptance of any deed? One is correctness of intention. There's one other requirement for a deed to be accepted by Allah. Anybody know what that is? So if I'm feeling like really holy and spiritual one day, can I pray 5 rakahs for Asr? No. It's not enough to have the good intention to please Allah. I want to pray more. It also has to be according to the Sunnah of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So memorize these. If there's anything you take away from what I said today, for the acceptance of any deed, you must fulfill 2 conditions. Number 1, sincerely only for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Your intention must be sincerely only for Allah. And number 2, it has to be according to the Sunnah of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I know a lot of work goes into all the great work that is done here in these organizations. So much scheduling and time and effort goes into it. You want to make sure that they are done right so that they are rewarded and accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It cannot turn into a hangout casual space, which is at odds with the permissibility of the interaction, right? The permissibility comes into question. The legitimacy of the whole organization comes into question. So if you see something inappropriate, say something. Own it. It's your space. You're in charge of the environment. And inshallah, I think the leadership will be receptive if you say it in the right way. But since you're part of it, you must strive to keep it Islamic and therefore reap the blessings and all the productivity and great work that can come out of it. I just want to conclude with Surah Muhammad, because remember, when you do things that are the right things to do, the only reason you need to do those things, even if they're hard, is because they are pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Do the right thing because it's the right thing. You don't need any other motivation. And this reminds me of the verse in Surah Muhammad, وَالَّذِينَ اهْتَدَوْا زَادَهُمْ هُدًى وَآتَاهُمْ تَقْوَاهُمْ. Those who have adopted the right path, doing the right thing because it's the right thing, God increases them in guidance and gives them their taqwa. You will be on an ever increasing trajectory of goodness and khair and taqwa if you just do the right thing, say the right thing, don't ignore it, and don't be afraid. Do it anyway. Wallahu a'lam.
Jazakumullah khair, Sister Sumara. One quick thing on my earlier point, the 4 points that I mentioned. If any of you guys like to read, there's a 50-page paper that was done on these 4 things by Imam Asif Harani. Some of you guys may know him. It's an excellent piece of research that kind of goes about like, you know, where did we get lower, like where do we basically get these 4 things, right? And they goes into a lot of details. So if anybody's interested, I'm gonna be at the table outside. You can come. I can send you the link. It can obviously go into a lot of details. The last thing I want to leave you guys with is a question and then one comment, inshallah. Of all the things that we've mentioned today, what do you find it to be the most challenging part when it comes to interacting with non-Muslim opposite gender? Someone new. Someone who hasn't spoken yet. Yes. Speak up a little bit. Sure. Okay. Okay, it's a great example. So when you go to, you know, a career fair or an interview, and you have to shake their hands. Okay, very good. Anything else? Anything else? Yes.
I think setting boundaries without staying
Mm.
because sometimes on one hand, if you're trying to avoid that stuff, that's very good.
Sure.
Start things like if you're a certain way.
Sure.
They also kind of like, oh, she's Punjabi, she acts like this.
Mm.
So it's really hard to set that boundary because we don't understand how that can
Okay, very good. So there's that fear of coming off in, you know, the wrong way to, especially somebody who doesn't understand. Very good. Okay. Anyone else? What are some of the biggest challenges? Again, specifically interacting with non-Muslim opposite gender from some of the things that we've mentioned. Yes, in the back.
Properly controlling your gaze and your eyes so they might not be dressed.
Very good. Controlling your gaze and your eyes when they're not dressed properly. Very good. Anyone else? Anyone else? You guys all win before. Yeah, sure, go for it.
I think genuine offense being taken on
Yeah.
the other end, like,
Okay.
and then being confronted, like, so weird.
Why you so weird, bro? Yeah, okay. Yeah,
So getting into the culture sometimes, like,
very good culture.
you can't always do the thing they do.
Of course. Yes. Yeah.
not do the handshake. So having to like stop from shaking hands.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. Yes.
Possibly having to explain yourself.
What is it?
Possibly having to explain yourself.
Oh, that's a good one. It just, the explanation can be really tiring and annoying. Anything else? Yes.
Questioning their intentions.
Ooh, questioning their intentions. Very good. Okay. Anyone else? Okay. So 2 things, inshallah. Number 1 is, I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make it easy for you. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect you. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to let your college life be a time in your life that allows you to be closer to Allah, not further away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give all of us the confidence and the courage to face whatever vulnerability that may come in our way. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow for us to do the best we can to stand up for our deen and our values. It's not easy. Again, a lot of you guys mentioned some really real examples. I think when we talk about interacting with Muslims of the opposite gender, there might be a little bit of ease, for you to explain. When it comes to non-Muslims, I'd like to think that quite a lot of your interactions are with non-Muslims, right? In a classroom, outside of that, like MSA, but most of your classes, you may not have other Muslims with you in the class or what have you. One thing to remember, guys, is you don't ever need to explain yourself. Somehow we have been put into this mindset that I have to explain to you what I do, why I do what I do, right? But at some point, We need to get to a point where I don't shake hands. Why? Well, it's none of your business. It really is none of their business. And I know, again, it's like, oh, it's gonna hurt their feelings. So what? And again, this is not me encouraging you to be rude and mean. But you're not mean when you tell somebody, I don't shake hands. Yani, why is it that I have to conform to your standards and it's not the other way around? Because this double standard, by the way, starts showing up in everything else when it comes to Muslims. And when you are in Rutgers University, one of the largest Muslim population in the United States, across many of the universities, right? If you only get 20% of the sisters saying that, it becomes the standard. Eventually, non-Muslims, they know or will know that Muslims do not shake hands of the opposite gender. You set the standard. And then when they ask why, it's not why because they're questioning, it's why because they're trying to get to your standard. Then your conversation is completely different. Talk to me at 9 when I finish my class. I'll explain to you everything. Right? Don't get cornered. We have to be able to stand for our deen. I don't shake hands. You don't even have the right to ask me why. Because I don't ask you, why do you hug girls? What made your standard better than my standard? It's not. I believe that my standard is my own protection. I don't know your intention. I don't know why you come and shake my hands. There's a lot of sick people in the world, guys. Real talk. So make sure that you set your own standard. Okay? Are you going to be looked at as the weirdo? Maybe. But is it going to be the case all the time? Not necessarily. Not necessarily. Guys, we live in a time where a lot of weird things are accepted. A lot of weird things are accepted. You're telling them, don't shake my hand, don't touch me, bro. Simple as that. And the same thing goes for the brothers. And wallahi, I promise you guys, you'll be surprised by how many people eventually will come to appreciate it. And they'll come and say, I want to be like the Muslims. Right? Just like the people today are saying, I want to be like a Palestinian, they will be like, I want to be like a Muslim when they interact with each other. It's not easy, but that's okay. So make sure you are setting the standard. Number 2, the last thing inshallah I end with, is An-Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam tells us that whatever you learn from the deen, take what you are able to do. Right? You need to do the best you can. Are you gonna come out of the college life sinless? No, you're gonna make some mistakes. Not okay. I'm not saying it's okay, right? But don't beat yourself too much. It's college life, right? And if I can be your big brother for a second, for both the brothers and sisters, if you leave college, being able to pray 5 times a day and staying away from major sins, you've done yourself a pretty good job. And again, like, I know college today is a lot worse than when I was in college many years ago. If you leave college with being able to pray 5 times a day on time and staying away from major sins, you've done yourself a pretty good job. Right? So stay around Muslims, try the best you can, don't beat yourself up to it too much, right? You may, slip here and there. Just go back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and make sure that you give yourself some grace. Because it is hard. Even if people look at you in a weird way or they think you're strange, guess what? It's all good. It's all good. Wallahi, you'll be surprised. They will see you as a strange for so many unstrange things. Then let it be for Islam, for the things that we believe in and stand for. Because we have a lot of beautiful things to stand for. Jazakumullah khairan. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. I believe we're going to have some Q&As, correct?
Okay, I'm gonna open it up to the crowd before we go over the form. If anybody wants to ask anything to either Brother Muhammad or Sister Samara or either of them, like you guys can do it right now. Feel free. You can raise your hand.
Wait, do I direct it to someone or do I just say it? Okay. If you're in a situation where there's both brothers and sisters, and it's not like you're speaking directly to a sister, but it's more so like a team setting, right? Is it appropriate to make a joke that is at that time? Like, you get what I'm saying? Like, it's, you make a joke out of fun, but it's not necessary, but yeah, you get what I'm saying or no?
If it's not necessary, why do you need to talk? I mean, it's, you just said it. It's unnecessary. Just don't say a word, bro. Right? I mean, unless you're asking something else, I'm responding to what you're saying.
No, that's my main point. It's like, but no, like, say there's something humorous and you make a joke about it in a certain setting like that, but it shouldn't be said at all.
If it shouldn't be said at all, don't say it. Why is this so hard? Right? I mean, again, like it's fun to say funny things and make people laugh. It goes back to intentions, right? I mean, we are more likely to find ourselves funnier when sisters are around than when brothers are around. And I'm not talking at you, obviously, right? Same thing with sisters, right? You might find yourself, taking care of your extra hijab because there's an MSA event on Thursday nights than like Tuesday nights, for example. Or I don't know if you guys want to carry. But then again, like, just these. But again, you answered yourself. If it's unnecessary, don't say it, right? You are more likely to get in trouble by saying stuff than when you're staying quiet. Some of the never mind. Oh.
I have a question. So I have this story and I didn't know what to do at the time. So basically, I had this one friend. It was one of my friends, and I was with him for a little bit, and then we both went to his group. It's not my friends, it's his friends, and they were drunk. So I was there with them, and then this drunk girl was going crazy, and then she started like, "Hey," and just gave me a hug, and I was in complete shock. I was just I stood there like this, and I couldn't do anything because she was a girl. Like, I couldn't slap her like this. I couldn't do anything. I was just in complete shock, and she just gave me a hug, and I was like this, frozen. So what was I supposed to do in that situation?
Did anybody not hear what he said? Okay. Basically, a drunk girl hugged him and he didn't know what to do.
How many of you guys get hugged without you knowing? Is that like a thing? So here's the thing, right? Let's if we can be real for a second. People, generally speaking, Muslims and non-Muslims, will interact with us based on the boundaries we have or not have, right? I find it to be somewhat rare and could be weird if somebody's meeting you for the first time and giving you a hug. It happens, but it's very rare, right? It is very rare. If that person knows you beforehand, most likely you've dropped some boundaries that gave them the space to come and give you a hug. That's what we're talking about, right? I mean, Sister Samara addressed it, like your tone, the things you speak, the things that you say, you're not saying. You create that boundary, right? Now, if that happens out of nowhere, again, just a random boy or girl will come and hug you, right? If that person is someone you'll be interacting with in the future, right? You tell them respectfully, I'm sorry, I was caught off guard, but please don't do it again, right? If again, like if it's somebody that again you literally just got off guard and you didn't push it. There's a way between slapping and getting a hug. Like there's a middle. You know what I mean? Sometimes like you can do like the side thing where it feels like I don't want to get hugged. There's a way to work around. But again, if it happens, seek forgiveness, move on. You're still a Muslim. Everything is fine. But just if it's a person you will interact with again, make sure you set this boundary right up front. And again, guys, wallahi, it's really not that strange. Right? It's not that strange. I'll tell you, I go to events for work, and honestly, I don't even shake anybody's hand. I don't even say anything. Just go and sit. Right? And then sometimes halfway through, we're getting lunch or whatever, or far, on another table, somebody will see us like, hey, that's it. Right? They know, like, I'm not the type of a guy who will go and hug. And this, by the way, this goes for boys and girls. I don't go around and hug the guys I work with. Right? It's not. And then it becomes a thing, right? One after the other, it just becomes a thing. You don't even have to say anything. You just don't do it, right? So anyway, Allah knows best. I know it's hard, but just if it becomes a habit with the same person, then you need to address it. Like, don't hug me. That's it. Allah knows best.
Does anybody else have a question from the crowd?
How do you deter a non-Muslim man from speaking to you or stop a conversation with you?
Okay, so she asked, how do you deter a non-Muslim man from speaking to you or just stopping a conversation with them? And obviously vice versa.
Yeah, that actually is not too difficult, especially if you're expecting this person to kind of want to talk to you longer. Sometimes I'll just like set a timer on my phone, and then when the timer goes off, they don't know if it's time or if it's someone calling me, right? Also, the type of answers you give. So if you give very short, to the point, I'm too busy to talk to you toned answers, they do get the point, yeah. So I do that even with like sisters sometimes. It's quite effective.
Okay, anybody else from the crowd? Okay. Okay, I'll go on to the form. This is something related to culture, and there's an example that the person who asked the question gave, which is, what should I as a female do when an older non-mahram man puts his hand on top of my head in a greeting, especially when it's like a huge cultural thing, like in Desi culture or whatever it is.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. It happens to me all the time. So basically, if they're like senior citizens, then the rules change a little bit. Like the brother was asking about joking with the opposite gender. Actually, the Prophet ﷺ did joke with someone of the opposite gender. And you know the story, right? It was that woman who asked, will women enter Jannah? And the Prophet ﷺ said, no old women will enter Jannah, because she was really old and she started crying. And he was joking with her, right? And then he told her that it's because everyone will be young. So what that indicates to us is that when someone is a lot older, then the rules become a little more lax. Like when you're a certain age, like when women are really, really elderly, then the rules of hijab even become lax. So if it's a much older uncle, you know, someone who could be like your father or grandfather, well, it depends on how old your dad is. He might not be that old, but like your grandfather, you know, like someone really old. And those are the ones who generally have this habit. It's considered a form of greeting and like showing affection. Then, you know, the rules seem to be a little more lax with extremely senior members of our communities. Wallahu alam, Brother Muhammad can add to that if you like.
So, you give like a number though? It's like 60 we talking or 80? I just want to make sure.
89.
Okay, we're gonna have to wrap up now. So jazakallah khair, guys, for all your questions. But before we fully wrap up, I'd like to give the floor to Brother Muhammad to talk about Syrian Forum, which is the organization he's a part of. And yeah.
So first, I wanna thank the organizers for allowing me to speak for a few minutes about Syrian Forum. This is not a fundraiser, by the way, but we will definitely accept donations. When was the last time any of you guys heard about Syria in the news? Does anybody remember like a date or a year or like a time where you heard about like, oh, something is happening in Syria? Yes. Yeah, during the earthquake, so about a year and a half ago or so. Okay. Anyone else? Yes. Sure. So during the Arab Spring back in 2011, when a lot of the Muslim countries were like going through revolutions, right? Syria actually was the most violently respond country out of the entire Middle East. There's some estimates, right, that the people that were killed as a result of the revolution accounted for about 1 million people. About 1 million people were killed. The first time where chemical weapons were used was inside Syria. You know, we heard about it happening in Gaza earlier on, towards the beginning, like early this year, January, February time frame. But actually the first person to use chemical weapons against his own people was the president of Syria, Bashar al-Assad. And obviously with devastation after devastation, the war actually never stopped. SubhanAllah, I did not know that Sister Samara studied in Damascus. Damascus was bombed 2 days ago, and 2 weeks ago also, right? Halab was bombed about a month ago. Now, there's a 99% chance none of you guys have heard of these things, because it's not in the news for a lot of various reasons. But I'll tell you today, in North Syria, right, there are 5.2 million people. 90% of them live under the poverty line. That's about close to 4.5 million people who don't have enough food to eat on a regular basis. Half of the Syrian population have been displaced from their homes over the last 10 years. That's 16 million people. The largest group of refugees in the world are Syrians. So when we talk about Syria, Syria is literally have been in an emergency crisis mode for the last 12 years, since 2011, or 13 years. And it has not gotten any better. Now, if I ask you, how many organizations do you know that work inside Syria? Does anyone know? Inside Syria, not in Jordan, not in Turkey. There's a lot of organizations that help refugees around Syria. There are very few organizations that actually help inside Syria. We are one of them, alhamdulillah. Syrian Forum is a registered US 501c3 non-for-profit that works inside Syria. Now, I can obviously spend the next 20 minutes talk about them. I'll mention two things. In North Syria today, which is a region where we work the most, right? Because it's the safest zone in all of Syria. Today, there's 1.2 million orphans in that region alone. That's close to 25% of the population. So basically, 25% of the population are orphans. There are 1 million students that do not go to school. Does anybody want to take a guess? Other than Zakaria, I don't know if he's still here. Because we were talking about it earlier. What is the number one reason for kids not to go to school inside North Syria? Does anybody want to take a guess? Yes?
There are no schools?
There are no schools? Okay, that's one reason, but that's not the biggest reason, yes. They don't have to, you're very close. Yes? Early marriage for the girls. The number one reason for the girls, they have to be sent to early marriages. Girls at a very young age are sent. That's just the norm because their parents cannot afford taking care of them, so they send them to early marriages. As soon as they hit puberty, they're sent off.
It's not funded because the fund is going somewhere else.
So the number one reason for boys is that many of their parents or their guardians, if they're orphans, have to send them to work. Child labor is so common. There's some statistic that says there are 800,000 children that work today inside North Syria. The idea here, guys, is that it's a true crisis. Wallah, it's a true crisis, and it's something that is just unheard of. Nobody's talking about it because nobody knows about it. Simple as that. So alhamdulillah, we are an organization that works inside Syria, right? We are registered. We are, alhamdulillah, we have so many other programs. For some of you guys that came, and you may have seen on your chairs, these are student sponsorship programs that we have, and then you can also sponsor an orphan who's a student, right? Obviously, as college students, I know a lot of you guys are broke. No offense, right? Obviously, it's just the college life. But I also know some of you guys may be able to do something. It could be through your family, it could be through people that you know, it could be through your friend group. Maybe you have 3-4 people that says, hey, we're gonna sponsor an orphan every year, or whatever it may be. So inshallah ta'ala, if you can, I think that'll be great. There's a lot I can say about the organization. So I'll be in the table, inshallah, until the last person leaves. If you have any specific questions, if you do want to volunteer, we have a lot of volunteer opportunities in the United States. We're not gonna send you to Syria, don't worry. Or if you just have any other questions, inshallah, I'll be at the table with brother Sha'lan right there. His first name is Sha'lan, by the way. My last name is Sha'lan, by pure coincidence. Anyway, jazakumullah khairan, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Okay, another announcement that I just found out. We got permission to share. So during the introduction, it was also mentioned that I lead the YM travel team, and we actually have a Umrah trip scheduled for the end of this year, right? And Sister Sumara will be the sister lead with us, and we have Sister Sheikh Ali, who is currently studying in Medina. He will be the brother lead, and then there's some other logistical leads. A lot of people come to me and say, oh, your prices are very expensive. And my response to you is if you find a package that offers what we offer, I'm willing to price match. Just find the package. There's a 99% chance you will not find the price that we have for that time. It's during Christmas break, which is the busiest time of the year, right? So obviously other times before and after can be a lot less expensive, but we do also have financial aid that can help a lot of the people. We will not give somebody 50% off. Please don't come to us if you're trying to get 50% off. We don't have the money to do that, but we can help with a lot of money, inshallah ta'ala. So anyway, if you have any questions, do let me know, inshallah. I'll be on the table for either of these things because I lead that travel team. Anyway, jazakumullah khair, guys.
Okay, so before we end off, I'd just like to give a few other announcements MSA related. If you guys want to buy merch, there's merch outside. There's a bunch of crew necks. If you see anybody wearing the light blue ones, that's what it is. They're super nice, $22. Go buy them. And then if any specs have announcements to make, you guys can come up.
Assalamualaikum guys, I just want to let you know Sister Social is going to be going on our annual apple picking trip this Sunday, inshallah. So if you're free on Sunday, definitely come. We're going to be leaving from the Douglas Student Center at around 11, and then we're going to be going to Giammarie's Farms in East Brunswick. And we'll arrange carpool and everything. If you do plan on joining us, just join